Good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today for the 6th Annual League of Women Voters of Arizona series of Lunch and Learn sessions. We have a wonderful presentation planned for you today. We'll begin with an introduction of our presenters from our LWVAZ president. After messages from our speakers, we'll conclude with a question and answer segment as time permits. Finally, we will conclude with resources to stay updated with the latest league news and membership information. Thank you again for joining us today. Please enjoy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Grace Mary Thesfield, for getting us started. This afternoon, we are looking forward to hearing from some experts on funding the future, strengthening public education in Arizona. Our presenters this afternoon will be Beth Lewis, Executive Director of Save Our Schools Arizona, and it will also be Jennifer Burns, Director of Government Relations and Health Policy with the Children's Action Alliance. Unfortunately, Rebecca Baby, who is attending a number of committee hearings at the Capitol, is unable to join us. Our moderators this afternoon are Tina Malika, President of Northwest Maricopa Local League, and also she is the lead organizer for our League of Women Voters of Arizona issue team on education, and was also instrumental in shepherding our updated education public policy, which got overwhelmingly approved by the membership last year. In addition to that, you will have Grace Mary Thesfield. Grace is from Greater Tucson. Grace Mary Thesfield is our Grace. If you will please showcase Tina and yourself, I would appreciate that. Thank you all. Share the spotlight here. Grace is a member of Greater Tucson on their board and also leads the youth coordination program in Greater Tucson. She serves as an intern for the League of Women Voters of Arizona advocacy group. And we're very delighted to have both Grace and Tina, one upcoming leader and one absolutely, rock star leader of the League to shepherd us through this presentation. My role this afternoon is to set the stage for how to enjoy your Lunch and Learn event, and I'll go through what the League is about. This event is open to the public, so as is necessary, we remind the public and our members about the League and our positions, okay? Please mute your microphone. The most important thing for you to know is do not use the chat feature to post questions. We would like you to please use the Q&A. It's in the toolbar. If you don't post your questions in the Q&A, our hosts and moderators will not be able to see them. Grace Mary Thesfield is going to be moderating the questions and curating them, and during the Q&A section, we'll tee those up to be asked of the panelists and the co-hosts. We also would like you to be aware that, time permitting, we will decide what questions we can ask the speakers. Any unanswered questions that we are tracking on our Q&A, we will try to get the answers from the speakers and share those with those registered for today's event. You can contact us at lwvazadvocacy@gmail.com. We would like you to know that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the LWVAZ's YouTube channel. And you want to look for us as at LWV Arizona 3061. And Grace is going to put that link in the chat in case you want to save that. The League of Women Voters, we are celebrating our 105th anniversary, or did, on February 14th. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. We envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. There are three things we would like you to be mindful of. We are a nonpartisan grassroots organization. We are an all-volunteer organization working to protect and expand voting rights to ensure that everyone is represented in our democracy. The way we empower and defend democracy is through advocacy, which is part of the series that we are presenting to you all. Education, which is also part of our work today, is to educate you about issues that you should join us to advocate on. And not very uncommon is to litigate at both the local, state, and national levels. The other thing that we want to be sure that we are mindful of is that we don't act on any and every issue. We only act on an issue when we have a public policy position to address it. And we arrive at that public policy position through deep study. Some take 1 year, some take 3 years. Tina was instrumental in updating our education public policy position last year, and it took them about a year to do that. And what we do when we do those studies is we pursue the facts, the details, both positive and negative, and we come to consensus as members about the policy. Once we have arrived at a policy, we are then in a position to act on it through advocacy. I'd like to be able to share with you all what we are planning on doing in the next 100 days and really through to 2025, and what our Defend Democracy framework will be. I want to share with you that we believe it is prudent to do the most about those things we can do the most about. So we cannot pick every issue. We cannot pick every battle. What we do know is we have gold standard priorities that we will be focusing on. One is democracy education and election administration support. 2 is restoring and defending voting rights protection. 3 is abolishing the Electoral College. 4 is protecting democracy organizations and institutions, which includes our public education, on which we have a very strong position. And the third and the last, of course, not the least, is protecting reproductive freedoms. We oppose any efforts to bring forward a national abortion ban. At this time, I'm going to turn over the program to the capable hands of Tina Mollica, president of Northwest Maricopa County Local League, and to Grace Tesfield. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Penny. And thank you, everybody, for coming. You're going to go forward, Penny? Oh, you want me to share? Okay. Let me get my screen up, guys. All right, we have with us Beth Lewis and Jennifer Burns today. Thank you both for joining us. Beth is the executive director of Save Our Schools Arizona. She is also a public education advocate for K through 12 schools, founder of the efforts to unite parents, educators, elected officials, business leaders, and members, community members in support of Arizona public schools. She is a former K through 12 teacher with 12 years of experience in Arizona public schools, and a mom and dedicated supporter of public education. Her advocacy interests include improving public education and K through 12 policy in Arizona and promoting community collaboration for public school support. She is a graduate of Arizona State University. Today, Beth is going to be talking to us a little bit about public and private school funding, including the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program and the consequences of that program for our public schools, as well as the broader implications for equity and accountability in our education system. She'll talk a little bit about the current education legislative landscape, including a little bit about Prop 123 and the aggregate expenditure limit for K through 12 schools. And thank you, Beth, for kind of filling in at the last minute on that. We also have with us Jennifer Burns, who is Director of Government Relations and Health Policy for Children's Action Alliance. She is former Arizona State Representative from 2003 to 2009. She is a government relations consultant for MHC Healthcare and Marana Chamber of Commerce. She was a staffer for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor's Civil Discourse and Civic Engagement Project and Senior Director of Government and Media Relations at Arizona Alliance for Community Health Centers. She Her advocacy interests are expanding healthcare access in rural and underserved areas of Arizona, and she is also graduate of University of Arizona. Jennifer will be closing out our session with just some strategies that we can use to effectively engage with our legislators through meetings, testimonies, written communications, kind of giving us some action items that we can do. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Beth. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to stop my share so that you can share yours.
All right, thank you so much. Let me see. I've just sent a request to share my screen so I can show my slides. And looks like we're good. Thank you. Thanks for everybody's patience. I've been fighting an illness for a week and I'm feeling much better, but my voice is still a little scratchy, so I'm sorry. But it's so good to be here with you all. And we are going to be talking about public education. As Tina said, I'm a huge advocate for our public schools. I taught in our public schools for 12 years. I've witnessed firsthand the magic that happens when our schools are filled with wonderful trained teachers and great resources, and the absolute just incredible things that can happen when public education is funded. So we at Save Our Schools Arizona are a network of 20,000 education advocates and supporters across Arizona. We are nonpartisan. We are a community-based organization, and we fight for strong public schools. That's all we do is public education. We, like so many of you, probably share the same why. I know everybody's is slightly different, but at the end of the day, we know that every child in our state deserves access to a quality, well-resourced classroom that is, within their neighborhood. They don't have to bus hours away. We believe that public schools are so important because they're the centers of our community. They not only have, football games and things for the community, but also things like food pantries and backpack drives and shoe drives and ways to support the health and just to nurture not only students, but also community members and parents. And we also know that great schools are really important for our economy. They're really important for our neighborhoods, and dollar for dollar are the best investment we can make. And in other words, this is our why. So here are just some snapshots of some things that we've shared actually just over the last month. So this is just a snapshot of the great things that are happening in Arizona schools right now, from inclusion and making sure that our students have what they need to be successful, including food, student gardens, a lot of amazing awards for our incredible students and schools, and also really great programs like robotics. So we know that Arizona schools are doing a lot for our kids. We also know that our lawmakers could be making it a lot easier to do a lot more of these great things. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Many of you are following at the national level. Of course, I'm sure that you are seeing that Project 2025, as promised, is attacking the U.S. Department of Education through the Trump administration. We've seen threats not only to the department, but also to the funds that the department distributes. We'll talk a little bit later about this, but this is nothing new for us in Arizona. Arizona has been living Project 2025 for over a decade. And honestly, they're really taking a lot of the things that have really hurt our schools, our kids, and our state, and they're taking it to the national level. So, I think our voices in Arizona have an outsized importance to really talk to our friends and family, not just here, but also around the country, to say, you don't want to replicate this at a national level. We're really struggling here. But the war on public education does typically across the states follow the same playbook. You often see people discrediting public schools and educators. You'll see horrific accusations against our teachers, calling them all sorts of horrific names. You see boogeymen, like things like CRT and DEI that are thrown against public schools. Even school letter grading systems and terminology around failing government schools. And all of that is really to create an atmosphere where defunding public schools is an answer, and where pushing things like vouchers, becomes a little bit easier. And that's what we've got here. And really, we're seeing brick by brick, our public schools are being privatized in front of our eyes. There are a lot of groups around the country that are fighting to privatize our public education system, to really dismantle these public institutions that we hold so dear. These are just some examples. I'm not going to get into what each of them do, but we see Betsy DeVos. She's been instrumental in pushing vouchers in Arizona and now across the country with American Federation for Children. We've got the Heritage Foundation, which has been here for decades, and now they're the architects of Project 2025. One thing I will note is a lot of these groups are operating on a national stage, but they started right here in Arizona. And so unfortunately, we are in the belly of the beast when it comes to school vouchers and privatizing our schools. So obviously, all of this has had quite an impact on our public education system. And everything I say is always with a caveat that our schools are doing a fantastic job. Our teachers are doing an incredible job to serve kids. However, they're doing more with less every single year, and honestly, every single day. And we're starting to see the cracks, and we're starting to see those real world impacts in ways that are really unsustainable. But our per pupil funding in Arizona is 49th in the country. So that means that we don't have any cushion when it comes to, enrollment fluctuations or anything else. Our schools are starved to the bone. We've got the most crowded class sizes in the US, which really hurts student learning, and it makes it harder to be a teacher. We've got our salaries that are ranked very, very low, which is leading to teachers leaving the classroom, right? And a lot of teachers, when they're polled, pay is a big part of it. It's also just a lack of support, and that's related to funding too. If you are an educator and you're also not able to really get help from a reading aid or sufficient support from special education staff or librarians and nurses and counselors, your job becomes the job of 5 to 10 people, and it really is unsustainable. Obviously, we are not doing enough in our state to address the student mental health crisis. A huge piece of that is because we just don't have the funds for counselors and social workers in our schools. We need double just to make the national average. We really need to double those staffs. And our school facilities, unfortunately, are far, far behind where we need to be, and especially in rural areas. Some of you can probably, speak to that because you're from rural communities, but our school facilities desperately need more funding in order to fix schools and even rebuild schools, because some of our schools are 60, 70 years old. And so they have some drastic renovations that need to take place, not only just to be great centers of learning for kids, but to be safe centers of learning for kids. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. My throat is still tickling today. So, that is just sort of the landscape. We know we're deeply underfunded. The only way to make that worse is to take away more funding, right? And our lawmakers have not slashed public education funding since the Great Recession, but they've failed to restore it. And now they've passed a massive voucher program, which is siphoning away nearly $1 billion. And so The opportunity cost is what we'll really talk about. The fact that lawmakers were able to dig into the couch cushions of Arizona's shrunken budget and find $1 billion for vouchers and leave our public schools without any of the resources they need to be successful. So that's kind of the frame. For anybody who, is a little not sure about a voucher, really a voucher is just a way to move public funds to private schools. It can look different. In some states, it's a tax credit voucher. In some areas, it's a education savings account voucher like we have, which is more of like a personal account that you can use for homeschool, private school, and all sorts of, educational or even non-educational expenses. Arizona is really one of the pioneers of this voucher. So we had the first tax credit voucher that's actually been for 25 years. And then, we've seen ESA vouchers in our state grow and grow and grow. The targeted program was for students with special needs in particular, and also other special circumstances. And that program was relatively small. I'll show you a graph in a second. In 2018, many of you will remember that Arizona voters were asked about vouchers on the ballot. You can see this sign up in the top corner to vote no on Prop 305, Save Our Schools Arizona's C4, put that on the ballot. And Arizona voters rejected it. I mean, it was a 2-to-1 margin. It was no question, we do not want these universal vouchers. And yet 2019, they came back to the legislature, tried to pass vouchers. 2020, 2021, Governor Ducey was pretty adamant that this was the thing that he wanted to do. It was clear that national special interests were pushing for Arizona to become the first state to do this thing. And in 2022, on the last day of legislative session, the 11th hour, the day after Roe v. Wade was overturned, so nobody was paying attention, and one of the last days of Ducey's legislative, power, he forced it in. And by one vote in the House and one vote in the Senate, they passed universal vouchers. And unfortunately, our state has had to deal with the impacts ever since. And here is a picture of those impacts, at least to our budget. So you can see that slow growth where, it's a lot of money, but nothing that was going to break the bank, right? These were targeted usages for students who really perhaps needed, in many, many cases, really needed this program. After 2022, the cap came off. Everybody was eligible, regardless of whether you're making a ton of money, you drive a Maserati, your husband has a Beamer, you've had your kids in private school their whole lives, you get the coupon. And so our state has really struggled since that expansion. We've had major budget deficits that have rocked, unfortunately, not just K-12, but all of our areas that we care about. Last legislative session, Hobbs and the legislature had to slash funding for roads, for healthcare, for higher ed, for universities, and many other buckets, and even had to sweep the opioid settlement, which would have really helped children and adults who are struggling with drug addiction and the threats there. Okay, so a lot of times we hear about school choice, right? This is vouchers are being sold across the country as school choice. And I think other states are doing a really great job of pushing back against that and saying, is this really a choice? Is it really a choice if private schools can pick and choose their students? Is it really a choice if higher income households are able to, recoup this funding very easily and low income families are not using it, but they're relying on their local public schools, which are closing? We know the data is hard to parse because the state really has created this black box when it comes to the voucher program. Tom Horn, Mr. Horn has kept a pretty close hold on all of this data. It's very hard to get information from the Department of Education. However, really great analysts from across the country have pulled out data that shows that the vast majority of families using the voucher program are well off, right? They're in suburban areas. Most of the funding is going to areas like Scottsdale and Paradise Valley for folks who are already choosing homeschooling or private school. And the impacts are also, starting to create a new cottage industry of unregulated pop-up schools in strip malls with uncertified teachers, with curriculum that is, well, first, there's no oversight of the curriculum, but also it's really questionable. There's some very, Christian nationalist curriculum, some very dangerous curriculum that is absolutely being bought with this funding, and taxpayers really have no idea how their dollars are being spent. All right, so I talked about this already, but we see this massive amount of funding, which really needs to be going to all of the things that we know would help our students learn. 92% of kids are in district and charter schools, which are publicly funded. Those schools are missing out from all of these things. They desperately need teacher and staff pay raises, smaller class sizes, career and technical education, all of these programs that are going to help not only our kids to go on to have rich, fulfilling lives, but also to help our state and our economy to continue growing and improving. But instead, we are facing major budget cuts that are unfortunately ramping up pretty exponentially. Not to scare anybody, but we didn't know how fast the other shoe was going to drop. And the last 6 months have really been eye-opening. First, it started with Flagstaff that was slashing bus routes, and then we saw Dysart and Apache Junction eliminate social workers, and then last year we saw Mesa Public Schools slash hundreds of teaching jobs, and then Paradise Valley shut down 3 schools, and then Roosevelt shut down 5 schools. And I actually need to update this because, this week, Phoenix Elementary is considering shutting down more schools. We've got Cave Creek is considering shutting down elementary schools. Page Unified, way up north, is considering getting rid of their middle school. They only have 5 schools and they're going to have to shut down an entire school. And the impacts of these school closures really can't be overstated. And it's really, really important that we collectively as advocates seek to understand these impacts, because when kids don't have a accessible quality school in their neighborhood, they really miss out, and not just on academics, but also on those community supports. I've already touched on this a bit, but I do think it's important to point out that all of this is happening in service of a program that is quite different than public schools. Right? All of this, brick by brick, we're taking money from public schools and giving it to private schools. And so it's important to understand those differences. Where public schools need to accept all of the students and their boundaries, private schools can choose whoever they wish. Public schools, are legally required to service students who are disabled or English language learners, or students with IEPs and 504 plans. Private schools don't have to do any of that. They can, but there's no requirement. And actually, families waive their rights to these really important services. We also know that private schools, don't have any requirement to feed kids, to transport kids, which, if your family is doing great and has plenty of, ability to cart your kids around and feed your kids, then that's fine. But many of our families do not have that ability, right? And that's why so many more well-off families are utilizing this voucher. We also know that private schools don't have any obligation to taxpayers. So we know they do not have to hold open meetings. They don't have to make their meetings public. They don't have to make their budgets public. They don't have to show us anything. Whereas with public schools, all of that is published online. All of that is available, and we as taxpayers can go in and make our voices heard at school board meetings. We can advocate to school board members and to the superintendent, and I really do encourage all of you to do so. With private schools, we as taxpayers don't have any insight into the operations of a school or how our dollars are being spent. So in the meantime, we have a bit of a perfect storm here. So I've described the voucher drain, that's $1 billion away. I've described that we are dramatically underfunded in our public schools. We also are facing a cliff with federal dollars. So the last 5 years, our schools have had COVID relief dollars, ESSER dollars, which are incredible, and have really allowed our schools to sort of duct tape and bandage up some of these, impacts that I've been talking about, right? Where, they were gonna have to maybe shut down a school, or maybe they were gonna have to lay off some teachers, but because the feds came in and offered that extra support that our state is not giving, we were able to sort of keep it together. Those dollars are gone as of this school year, by the end of this school year. And so, that is going to accelerate what is already a completely, starved and broken system right now in our schools. And so these impacts that are being felt are honestly probably going to accelerate unless our state steps in and raises those dollars, right? Unless our state can come in and find more funding for our public schools, which they, I would advocate that that would be beneficial to students. One way that folks are advocating for more dollars is through Proposition 123. It's been in the news a bit. I imagine if I was here with you in person, I would kind of take a poll as to who's been hearing about this and how we feel. But it has been in the news. I know Penny asked me to do a little bit of background on Prop 123. So you probably remember it from about 10 years ago. In 2016, Governor Ducey was more newly elected, and he pulled together, there's a picture of young Ducey. He pulled together an interesting coalition. He had the Chamber of Commerce, he had, some of his folks, and then Democrats, and he had the Arizona Education Association, the school boards, the SUPs. Everybody came together to say, let's do this thing. We know our schools need funding. And there was a lawsuit that he was trying to settle. The lawsuit said that, hey, you cut our school funding in 2008, and we've never gotten that back. So this was the solution. And I really want to highlight the win number here, 50.92%. So that was back in 2016 with a wide bipartisan coalition, only passed by 0.92%. And it is set to expire this year on July 1st. It was a 10-year measure, and lawmakers have known that for 10 years. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen folks be able to come back to that table and create that winning coalition again. Most of you probably have noticed that our state is more polarized now than it's been in a long time. And there is a divided political environment at the Capitol. We've got obviously a Democrat as governor. We've got a Republican-run Senate and House. And so that division is very keenly felt on this issue. We have a version of Prop 123 that's moving its way through the House and Senate right now. There are mirror bills. Interestingly, each has a version that's just a straight bill that could go to Governor Hobbs, and also a separate version that could go directly to voters and avoid her veto stamp. So it's sort of everything's on the table. The provision that is being promoted by Mr. Gress in the House and Mr. Messnard in the Senate would continue the 6.9% rate, which is about $300 million a year. However, there is a provision that limits the payment to teachers on a performance rating scale, which goes back to the Prop 301 days. Any teachers who are here probably remember the high stakes testing got worse. The top-down kind of threatening environment around standardized testing was worse. And this would really limit, it would honestly discriminate against teachers that are brand new and against teachers that primarily serve English learners and also students who are disabled or on IEPs and 504 plans. So, you know, it's for me, it looks like a bill that was written by people who are not educators, who really don't understand why test scores look the way they do. It's a little editorializing, but you know, we haven't taken an official position on this. We know it needs to get done. We know we've got to put something to voters to get this funding. However, I will say that even with all of the misgivings and the fact that these bills are kind of stalled right now, I think that this can be done through the budget. I do not think that Proposition 123 will be heard or will go to the ballot in 2025. I just don't think that coalition is there, and I don't think that that's really where the political will is there. I believe that it will most likely be placed on the ballot for November 2026, along with the governor's race and the midterms. So that's my prediction. I could be wrong. Lawmakers are pretty reluctant about this right now, and the one good thing I will say there is that lawmakers have said that they will backfill the 300 million for those 18 months that it takes for voters to weigh in. And, you know, I really hope that folks can come together and get this done. The only caveat I will put out there is that 300 million is truly a tiny drop in the bucket compared to what our schools need. It is absolutely critical that we have that funding. And we cannot lose that funding, but we need so much more for our students to be successful. So I'm almost done. I took on my co-panelist part, so I feel like I've been talking forever. I like Q&A so much more. The last kind of piece that I'll put out there is around what is happening at the legislature, what is moving. I wish I could say that lawmakers are, you know, excitedly tackling things that are important, like per pupil spending or special education spending, but instead we've got bills that are trying to rename the Gulf of America in textbooks that passed House Education Committee. We've got bills that are attempting to really censor teachers. There is a bill from Mr. Hoffman, again, that aims to jail teachers for introducing sexually explicit materials, which could mean having Romeo and Juliet on your bookshelf or having a picture of the statue of David in an art book in your art room. So that would jail teachers. We've got bills that are attempting to ban teachers from using students' preferred pronouns. I will say, of course, these bills will be vetoed by Governor Hobbs. We are so fortunate to have a backstop in our governor. However, the legislature currently has 20 bills that are SCRs and HCRs, which would avoid the governor's veto stamp. So we need to be very cognizant of those and try to, you know, advocate as best we can for good policy and for not cluttering our ballot so it's not 6 pages long. And one of those would have, I have some good news. One of those would have made school bonds have to pass by 60% of the vote, which is horrific because most school bond measures are so important and they only pass by like 1 to 5% if they do pass. But I think that bill, knock on wood, is functionally dead. It was held in committee. So really, really glad to see that because that would have avoided the veto stamp. And, you know, just quickly on the federal level, like I said at the beginning, you all are watching, you know, Trump has said he will dismantle the Department of Ed. He's putting the former CEO of the Wrestling Federation, Linda McMahon, in as the Secretary of Education. She made it through the final hurdle of the Senate Help Committee last week. So she will be going to the Senate for confirmation soon. I don't know the date yet. Her job ostensibly is to undo her own job and her own department. I really want to underscore that the Department of Education houses the Office of Civil Rights. It is responsible for civil protections for all students, specifically students with disabilities and, you know, BIPOC students and English learners, so many students who are needing those actual legal protections. They're attacking DI, they're attacking LGBTQ plus students and educators. And one of the really dangerous things we're seeing is an attempt to take all of the funding from the federal Department of Education and move that into block grants. They keep saying they're going to return it to the states. That can be voucherized, so they can take Title I funds and redistribute them at the state level. So whereas you might have gotten, you know, 13% of Title I funding was going to Title I students, they could reduce that to 10% and take 3% and send it to private school vouchers. They could do the same with IDEA. And there's actually a bill moving through our legislature right now that would allow the state legislature to do exactly that. So this is a viable and really dangerous threat, but it cannot be done without an act of Congress. It is necessary that Congress act to do all of these things. And I just want to remind people of that and to not, to encourage our lawmakers to not concede in advance that none of this is legal. Only kings can do all of this with the swipe of a pen, not a president. And they've also got a voucher program that would cost taxpayers $10 billion a year. And it would run a lot like the ESA and would only accelerate the privatization of our public schools at the national level. And yes, it can be stacked with state vouchers. And my goodness, we cannot let that happen. So we really need to advocate to members of Congress that we want responsible education policy. And with that, I think I'm done. I know Jennifer is going to talk about some strategies for advocating, so I won't do this slide. I'll stop sharing. I know that's a lot, but please do follow Save Our Schools Arizona Network and our C4. We have actions that you can take every single day. This week is Public Schools Week. We are celebrating our public schools, and there are ways to get involved every single day of the week. So thank you so much, and I'll stick around for questions.
Thanks, Beth. Really appreciate all that information. Jennifer, thank you for coming. I know you're busy at the Capitol today, so we appreciate your time. Jennifer, as I said, is Director of Government Relations and Health Policy with Children's Action Alliance, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about strategies we can use. Thank you, Jennifer.
Great, glad to be here. I'm glad we were able to make this work. I'm literally sitting on the ground outside the Senate office building, the Senate building, waiting to testify on a bill. They've broken for lunch, so we're good for a little bit, but this is the fun we have. So a couple things. One, and a large part of this, I am going to go back, as they said in my intro, I served in the State House from 2003 to 2009. It was actually a time when we had, the last time we had divided government with Governor Napolitano as the Democrats and Republicans in control of the legislature, and did a lot of bipartisan work and things in that line back then. But so I'm bringing that perspective to this, both from having done that and then also now being on the outside as a lobbyist and working with folks on how to talk to legislators. One of the aspects when you are, and this is whether you're talking to and emailing them, doing a fact sheet, whatever you're doing, and testimony, make it short, simple, and direct. Make sure you're saying, please vote for or against House Bill 2142 or whatever it is. You want to be specific. I would often, if it's an email, put that actually in your subject line so they say it and there's no question. I've had emails myself or had others say, I read this and I can't tell if they want me to vote yes or no. So you want to be very clear. Is it yes, is it no, and what bill number? Another piece, especially if you're doing email and fact sheets, very few paragraphs. I'm 20 years out and I still to this day have trouble reading paragraphs. If you give me a paragraph that's 6, 7 things long, lines long on a fact sheet, I'm going to scan. I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to skip it. You want to do bullets. So maybe make a sentence, a paragraph that's 2 to 3 lines at most, 2 to 3 sentences, and then do bullets and put your bullets and get rid of the extra words. You don't need the ofs, the theys, the stuff. Make it a very simple sentence that they're reading as few words possible, but it gets across what you want. The other piece to do, and I do this, sometimes you have to send a letter or something. I will bold and underline. So whatever the important part in each paragraph is, you want to highlight that because they're likely, the staff or the members likely to scan it as they go through. They may be sitting there reading the fact sheet as you're talking to them in their office, or they're scanning through emails and looking at stuff. They're going to scan it. So you want to bring them to the key things that you want. And sometimes you may feel you're overbolding, but you want to bring their attention so they see the whole sentence. And then they may look more or whatever. If you need to provide more, do a 1.5 page, maybe a 2-page letter when you're doing a letter, and then add an attachment. There's a memo with more information if you're interested. There's a report. It's still, you only want a couple pages, but that's one way to provide if it's more detailed and you want to provide more facts and figures. Do it as an extra. Your main stuff's in the email or in the letter so they don't go past it, but you can add the other if you want. One of the pieces would be also to have a leave behind, do a fact sheet so that if you go to a meeting or even if you have an email, sometimes you just do an email, and especially depending on where the bill is and it's just an email, please vote yes, please vote no, 2 paragraphs, a couple of bullets, 2 short paragraphs, a couple of bullets of why you're saying vote yes or no. But depending on if it's the first time, like in committee, feel free to have a 1-page front only fact sheet that goes with it. Again, short paragraphs, bullets, underline things in that line, color things that are going to catch their attention. And I learned the hard way. I'll admit, I thought 2-page, front and back. Why waste the back page? A couple of years ago, as a lobbyist, I had created something that was on the front and back. The member asked me a question. I'm like, well, if you turn the paper over, I told him 3 times. He never turned it over. He never looked past the front page. So kind of learned the hard way on the outside. Just make it seriously 1 page, meaning front only on those kinds of things. I mentioned be specific. If you are a constituent for whoever you're writing to, tell them that. When you're able to, sending an individual email to each member, like the 9 people on a committee or the 30 or 60 members that you're writing to, cutting and pasting, changing their name, makes more of emphasis than if you do one to all, the whole committee, or one to whole House or Senate, mostly because it can get caught in the spam filter that legislatures have when you're sending mass emails, and they like that personal attention. You can do it like if you're sending it to 3 members of your district, that's a little bit different. You could do 2 or 3 members of your district, but when you can, it's better to send it to a group than to not send it at all. But if you can do it one at a time, takes a little bit longer, you cut and paste, but you can still do it, and that does help. Couple other things, the request to speak system, it does matter. Legislators do look at that. They look at it as they're voting. If you're a lobbyist or associated with a group, it'll actually print in capital letters who you're representing. That helps to get their attention. Even if you're a member of the public, if they know you or whatever, they'll look for the names. They also look and see how many are for or against it. You do have to activate that. I'm sure the League of Owners, most of you probably are already activated. I'm sure the league has a way to sign you up. Somebody comes down to the Capitol, activate it, so that we make sure that whoever's giving input has an Arizona connection. But legislators actually do look at that system, not just when you're actually requesting to speak. That's a legacy because that's what it used to be used for. It's now also intended to show your support for or against bills. So that's important. Moving on a little bit, one of the key pieces, and I think this would be something y'all be great at, is build relationships. You do that both inside and outside of session. You want them to know who you are, so that if you do see an email or leave a phone message, they know who you are. They recognize, oh, I know that person. I know what they're here for, that kind of thing. And it gives a little bit of credibility when they know it. You can even become a resource where they'll call you. They know the issues you care about, and they'll pick up the phone and call you or email you saying, hey, I don't know about this bill. What do you think about it? That's something important to do. Something that can happen outside of session. Invite them to your events, invite them to things going on. Not all of them come, but many of them will, and they enjoy coming to groups, maybe talking about issues. You can also invite them one-on-one or 1-on-5, 1 or 2 members with 5 of you, going to lunch, going to coffee, just kind of getting to know them. That building relationship is really key. As we talked, another piece of it is the meetings. When you set up meetings with legislators, expect 15-minute meetings. We would do 2 to 3 hours of 15-minute meetings per group. Recognize also and appreciate they're not in full control of their schedule. Part of the reason I'm doing this sitting outside the Senate is the Appropriations Committee got moved from 1:30 p.m. to 9 a.m. this morning. So I'd already scheduled this in another event. So we're sitting here doing it in case our bill got pulled up, I could run inside quickly around that. The members have that same issue. They don't know what the schedule is. They can also get called into the speaker or president's office. They can have other constituents that others are around. So appreciate their time is busy. Some of them will step out of committee to meet with you, especially if you're constituents and you've driven a long way. Tell their offices, they'll work with you on that, especially those that are out of town and know you've driven to be here. And if you're not able to see them still, or if you didn't get a meeting in the first place, leave a note. Maybe you have that fact sheet and you had a little handwritten note. You know, I'm from your district. Sorry, we weren't able to meet today. Here's my number. Call me. I'd love to talk to you on this at another time. Or just leave a note, even if you didn't have a fact sheet. Leave something that's handwritten that kind of gives it to them to let them know you were here, you care, you're also paying attention. When you are meeting with them, one of the other pieces is to present your side. Talk about whatever you're meeting a bill, let's say, or you're meeting on an issue. Present your side, but then also say what the other side's going to do. I used to actually ask that question, saying, okay, I appreciate what you've said. Now, what is your opponent going to say? What's the other side going to say? I now, as a lobbyist, offer what the other side's going to say. For one, we're being honest and transparent. Two, I get to answer that. Typically I'm going to have my 15 minutes with them and I'm for this or against this. Then they may have a meeting with the other side. I'm not likely to get that follow-up meeting. Very rarely will a member have the time or inclination to call me to say, hey, this is what they said. What's your answer to that? So you say it up front, kind of give your side, say what the other side, here's what they're going to say. Here's why I think my side is more important here. And you don't say it that way, but here's how I answer their concerns. And you just go on and answer those and highlight that. And I think that's something that's really important. That gives you that chance to answer it and not leave it hanging. Both in meetings and in testimony, it's okay to say you don't know and I'll get back to you. And then you follow up and get back to them. That's okay to answer that and to say you don't know. That's much better than going out there and giving something and not having it correct. If you do, excuse me, it does happen at times where you'll give fact, you'll give information and you later find out it's wrong or it's changed. You want to follow back up with them. Your reputation matters the most and you want to follow back up and clarify, hey, I learned something else, or that was a little different than I thought it was. So here I want to clarify for you. When you are doing testimony, one, I think it's important to do. It's important to hear from members of the community, not just from those of us that are lobbyists. Lobbyists are important. We're representing large groups of people, but it's important to hear from individual members of the community as well. You want to plan 1 to 2 minutes for your testimony. Many committees nowadays will actually limit you to 1 to 2 minutes. Sometimes they will also limit you to only 3 people per side. So it doesn't matter if the whole room is full of people that are for or against it. They may still tell you to pick out 3 people and that's what it's going to be. So you want to pre-plan some of that. Have that 1 to 2 minutes, and I'll go back to appropriations. They're meeting all day today. They had 33 bills on the agenda. That's a long meeting. So you want to keep it short. Even if they're not limiting it, you want to keep it short. They'll typically give you a notice that 30 seconds, 10 seconds, something in that line, so you can be prepared. When you are testifying, you want to say, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Jennifer Burns, blah, blah, blah. You want to do that at the end of your testimony. Also say, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for your time. I'm available for questions. If it's something that you need more than that 1 or 2 minutes, I'll go ahead and give you a clue. You want to work with a member, maybe your member or somebody who supports you on the issue you are, for them to ask you a question. If members are asking questions, that's not time limited in the same way. So that can allow you to talk a little bit longer if you need to do it. One of the pieces that, again, members of the community bring is, I used to say that when legislators are looking at bills, it's black and white ink. It's black ink on a white piece of paper, and we only see it in that black and white. What people, when they're doing testimony, when they're meeting with us, even the fact sheets, they're making it into full living color. You want to tell stories. You want to show how this is real to me and how this impacts me, how this is going to impact our community, what the impact this is going to be. Maybe, especially if you oppose it, what the unintended consequences might be. That's something we're always afraid of, is what are those unintended consequences that maybe we don't see, but you do. But remember that, keep that in mind. You don't want to just go in there and do a recitation of what the bill does. You don't want to just do facts and figures. You want to put that in, use that information to put it into full living color for us and how it's going to impact people. You can make a difference. It does matter. We do listen to the people, to the community. A lot of our bills, that's even how bills start, is might be that coffee meeting that's out of session. You meet with a member and you say, hey, I'm having this problem, or this isn't working. Is this something we can do? It's going to matter, and especially the legislature we have, as to which ones go through. Right now, we have a Republican majority. Those bills tend to make it through more than Democrat bills. Democrat bills make it once in a while. There are some that get hearing and make it through. But be aware that then you might go, and we have a lot of Democrats that'll go find Republican sponsors on bills that'll help it move forward and so forth. But I am going to go back. We can make a difference. It can change it. It does matter. That's kind of what I have. So I will turn it back over and see if anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. So if Grace, if you will highlight Beth and Jennifer, we'll do Q&A in just a second. I actually do have a couple of questions I want to follow up with you two on. Beth, I wanted to clarify when you talked about Prop 123 expiring, did you say that they were, if it does expire without a bill, that they're going to backfill that money for us? Or do we just lose that funding?
Yes, there is a provision that it's been argued requires the legislature to backfill that funding, and the intent currently has been expressed by both sides that the intent is to backfill that funding in this year's budget. But remember that, then that would be 300 million that would be coming from the general fund instead of the state land trust, and our general fund is emaciated. So
I'll also add, and that's their intent from both sides. I think it's likely to happen, but until it happens, it hasn't happened. So that's the other piece.
Yeah.
you act like there are shenanigans down there ever.
Don't know anything about those.
Thank you both. One more thing. We didn't talk about the aggregate expenditure limit. So do you guys know, I believe, was it Grass that had a bill that was going to extend it for another year? Could either of you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I will pull up the bill number. It's important for everybody to know that the aggregate expenditure limit for this year was lifted in last year's budget. So we don't have any imminent or immediate threat, but there is a bill from Mr. Gress to do away with it for next year as well. And I know that Governor Hobbs has stated that as a key priority for the budget.
Yeah, I do think they've gotten a little tired of the threat and the panic every year of having to do it by a certain date, and may make that more of a let's do it a year in advance. Not a guarantee again, but I do think we've kind of seen that inclination to not have to panic.
So small steps, but not quite a permanent solution yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is the will on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've seen some things, but they don't get into committee hearings. I know. So, all right, Grace, do you have any questions from our viewers?
Yes, I do. We will start off with the first question. We have a question in the chat about the thoughts on the Say Dyslexia bill. And Beth graciously already typed an answer in the chat, but Jennifer, if you have anything to add on this question, we'd love to hear from you as well.
I don't. I'm actually not our education expert at Children's Action Alliance, so I'm not familiar with it.
No worries. We'll move on to the next question then. What are the downsides of using the state land trust as part of the school funding?
There was a lot of back and forth in 2016 as to whether the state land trust could, absorb those costs. And, I think we've seen 10 years of, pretty decent results. Like there has not been an up and down. There hasn't been a huge amount of, economic hit to the state. Our general fund is starved. So I don't think that there are a ton of downsides. The Hobbs proposal, last year was going to increase the percentage. And I know that the treasurer came in and said, whoa, we don't want to do that. There's all sorts of opinions there. However, I do think that the state land trust is never going to be able to be utilized to fill the massive gap of funding that we really need. So we really just need to be able to do more and remember that 123 is a Band-Aid.
Jennifer, anything to add?
No, I think Beth's gone over it a lot. You know, the one piece is there is 1, 2, 3 is a priority in some ways. I do think the timing of when it happens, you know, where is it going to happen this year? Is it going to happen next year? I think those are questions. Do they do it themselves? Do they do it to voters? All of those kinds of things. And as Beth highlighted earlier, the fact that it barely passed last time, that makes it tough as well. And who knows where it's going to be. I will give the other, and I know Beth went over some of this. We're seeing it, and we're seeing it with Medicaid. You know, what's happening at the federal government is at some point potentially. We'll see what they end up getting, and I haven't been able to check with it. I haven't seen news alerts, so I'm assuming the House hasn't voted on the resolution back there yet. But seeing what all happens, what does that have an impact here in the state for what funds are available for what's going on? You know, where does that impact the budget as to when it happens this year? Most likely, my guess would be we'll end up with a special session that the legislature will go on and do a budget. Congress will probably be after the legislature recesses, but if there's major changes, major cuts, then they're going to have to go into special session to deal with some of that. And that doesn't just affect 1, 2, 3, that affects a lot of other things that become a part of it, so forth. And so we'll see where all that happens. A lot of stuff to watch at that level as well, both in this healthcare across the board.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And then to go back to the question about the Say Dyslexia bill, Beth, I know you posted an answer in the chat. Would you mind reiterating what you mentioned just so everybody on the webinar can see?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that bill just asked districts when they're doing the IEP process to specifically write in that a student has dyslexia. You know, as an educator, I think the more specific IEPs can be, the better, because as students move through different elementary schools on to middle school, right? Like we want to make sure that things are written in clearly. And dyslexia is a huge crisis. I think that if lawmakers were really serious about helping students, there would be a ton of funding for identifying early dyslexia and then making sure that we have early interventions. We all know that that is the best way to treat dyslexia. And 1 in 5 people have dyslexia. So this isn't something that is rare. This is something that every educator should be equipped to handle well. And we haven't seen that movement from our lawmakers. So I guess that bill is sort of a bare minimum, but great.
Yeah, for sure. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Otherwise, that's all the questions we've got for now. So Tina, if you want to move into our conclusion, I think that would be fine.
Yes, thank you, Grace. First of all, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here with us, taking your time out of your busy schedules to educate us. Thank you, Grace, for your help here moderating this. I'm just going to leave us with a couple of closing thoughts. I know that you both gave us some actions to do. If you are a league member, you should be getting league advocacy alerts, which are going to tell you what bills that we advocate for based upon our policy positions. It is crossover week or crossover time. So the bills are going through appropriations and rules right now and moving into that next chamber. So in addition to doing the RTS that Jennifer talked about, emailing, calling, I do want to reiterate what Jennifer said, that you can go to the hearings and speak as a member of the public, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a community member, to speak for or against the bills that are out there, and also attend your school board meetings. There's a lot going on locally with our school boards. The fight that Beth was talking about starts at the local level. So find out when your school board meetings are. Many of them are online, but if they can see your faces there, sitting there in the seats, you also have opportunities before school board meetings to express your concerns. So thank you all for attending. Beth, I'm going to give you one more plug for your event that you're having, because the schools, your fundraiser, because Jess Piper is talking. And if any of you follow public education, she's a pretty dynamic speaker. So that might be something people may be interested in. Do you want to give us the details? Sorry.
Oh, yes. I didn't know if you were plugging me. Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I was, but you'll give us the details.
Yeah, it'll be on March 29th at the Madison Center for the Arts. We really hope that folks can go. There's hotel info on the website that I put in the chat as well if you're from out of town. Tickets are on sale. The event's upon us. It's about a month away, which is wild. We'll have student performances, including mariachi and strings and dancers, and student artwork displayed. We'll have a silent auction. Lots of yummy food, delicious drinks, and really great education advocates from all around the state. This is our second annual event, and the first one was one of the most fabulous evenings I have ever had. And I think this one is going to be even better because Jess Piper will be here. And like Tina said, she's a wonderful speaker and also a dear friend. She's a truly great person. They always say to never meet your heroes, but I've met her many times, and she is as wonderful as she is online. So I hope you all join us. It will be a great night.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and spending your lunchtime with us.
Unmute. No.
No, you're
thank you,
fine.
Tina. Thank you, Grace, for doing such a wonderful job in moderating. And thank you, speakers. Wish you all a wonderful afternoon, and I will close out the call. Thank you.
Thank you.